Hi and welcome to another Huddle Breakdown Extra Time. I'm your host Martin Murphy and joined as always by Alan and by James. How are you, my friends?
Conflicted.
Yeah, I 24 hours of swings in what's going on in the world. So what elation yesterday, and then overnight staying up till 3 a.m. local time, and not that. So
Celtic will always cheer you up, Alan.
That's
I'm
right.
sure. Yeah, sorry, James. I'll cheer you up. Yeah, very, very dramatic. There, I wasn't even going to mention it, but over the pond, my friend, I was sensitive to you. But I suppose das war gut, mein Freund. Yeah.
What?
That's about the extent of my German.
No, sprechen Sie.
That was good, my friends. I think I'm absolutely delighted about the Leipzig match. I think that's the 3 matches at home where we've come away with 3 victories. First time, I believe, since 2007. Puts us in a great position in the group, 7 points already, and against the team that was second in the Bundesliga, off the back of getting a excellent, in my opinion, 0-0 draw over in Italy against a team that's third in Serie A. What's not to like, James?
Nothing. I mean, it was. Let's just start with all the good stuff, because I mean, it's like 95% good.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. We can talk about sequencing and the 31st minute attempt by their 19-year-old midfielder that had he scored on it. Maybe we live in a different universe, right? And that was like the fork in Star Trek when you go down a different reality. But that's the whole point, which is, when you get into these games, and Rodgers has talked about this, like you can see evidence of players building confidence, but confidence is fragile. And we had some wobbles there after they scored, which, we talk about that all the time. That's the Celtic way in Europe, right? But whether by some variance or luck or fortune, whatever, we weathered it. And then from there, it was like, wow. I mean, just really, really impressive. And it's not that we weren't impressive prior to that. Like the balance of play, our press, their inability to handle our press, how smart our press was, the quality that we were showing on the ball generally. I mean, there were some hairy moments at times, but again, that's not unusual. But yeah, I mean, just some of the individual performances and how it played out was absolutely great. And that, again, backed up by the majority of the underlying data. So it's not like this was fluky or all variance or that kind of thing. Like this was a very solid, well-accomplished victory, and should be celebrated. It continues the idea that we're going in the right direction, some optimism in this campaign. So yeah, I mean, like I said, 95% positive, only because it's almost impossible to get to 100% positive. Like we don't live in that world. There's always some little things that go wrong in a game. But yeah, just what a delightful game. And even better so as you go back in, sometimes you have these performances and results, and then you revisit and analyze them, and you're like, you get tempered a little bit in your enthusiasm. This one's generally not that way. Like this one is legit positive through and through.
It does my heart good to hear those words, James, honestly. No, I would absolutely agree wholeheartedly. Even coming back last night, I was thinking about the last time that I can say I enjoy the game and I felt that we'd played so well in Europe. And I suppose the ones that came to mind for me, I'm going back to like the Martin O'Neill era. I'm thinking of Juventus 4-3. I'm thinking it was actually a qualifier against Ajax. We won 3-1 over in Amsterdam. And those were kind of up there in terms of actual performances, but I thought it was absolutely wonderful. Alan, what kind of really struck you about last night?
Yeah, I mean a lot, and a lot to be positive of, absolutely, for sure. And the most impressive, I suppose, was because you could easily see a sort of fairly classic Celtic European performance narrative emerging from that first half, right? the anthem sounds, the disco lights are on, You'll Never Walk Alone. The team comes out, they come roaring out the traps for 15 minutes. We're flying into them. The other team are looking a bit, oh my God, what is this? And then we don't score. And then they gradually take control back, and they take control, and they get control, they take control, and then they do score. And that is a pretty normal narrative that we've seen against good sides at Celtic Park. And you sort of think, well, all that good stuff was really just the adrenaline of the night. The team were whipped up, etc. And so, therefore, to come back from that and actually, yes, there was 15 minutes. The first half was almost precisely fell into three 15-minute acts. The first 50 minutes where it was all, yes, out the traps, we're at home, way. And then, then the next 50 minutes of, oh my God, they keep the ball, they keep the ball, they keep the ball. Oh my God, they look a bit dangerous. Oh no. And all that, right? And then the last 50 minutes, which was kind of 50-50 actually, but we just I suppose they made some bad mistakes, obviously, at the end, and to get that goal right on halftime was such a psychological boost.
Yeah.
But we were very aggressive in our pressing, really. I know we committed a lot of numbers, and we committed them high, as did they. So really, but really, what was the most pleasing aspect then was to come back. And Nicholas Kuhn did score a goal out of pretty much nothing, actually. So it wasn't like we came back and we were throwing everything at them and we finally got that equaliser. It was like, oh my God, we've scored. But it was the response to that, and to regain the confidence and to actually start to gain control of the game. Because after their goal, there were 21 shots in the match and we had 16 of them, right? So that's brilliant, right? That is a brilliant response to going a goal down at home. But and then it just got better and better as the second half came on. The calmness, the maturity of the performance, the ability to play under pressure. That was the thing that really got me. Even in that wobbly period, the wobbly period was bad, and that kind of fell down a bit. We kept giving the ball away in really bad areas, and we kept ceding control. But outside of that 15 minutes, what really impressed me was the teams, and I'm talking about everybody, even the defenders' ability to take the ball under pressure. And when I say that, I mean, have the ball in tight spaces, to be physically being challenged, to be knocked off your feet and all that, and to maintain control of the ball. When I see a team play like that, I think that's a good football team. That's a good European level side. And we looked a good European level side last night in terms of our ability to play under pressure, our ability to pass the ball under extreme pressure and maintain possession outside of that 15 minutes. That was the thing that really kind of pleased me the most, as well as I say, the ability to recover from that very wobbly period. And if you look at the pressing statistics are quite interesting, because although at halftime, I track turnovers, which isn't the same as pressing. It can be, they can be an overlap, but just simply giving the ball away. Celtic had given the ball away. I think it was it. Let me just check the number again. Sorry, I want to be accurate with this one. Yeah, it was 13 times. So 13 times we turned the ball over. And when I say turn the ball over, I mean turn the ball over, and we've got players wrong side of the ball. So it's what I call a packing turnover. And we'd only forced them into two, or they'd only given up two. So 13-2. That's not good, right? That really isn't good. But if you look at the actual pressing effectiveness throughout the match, both teams, according to Statusbomb, it was 164 pressures by Celtic, 163 by Leipzig. So this more or less the same, right? But if you look at regains from pressures, it was 50 by Celtic and 25 by Leipzig. Now, in the Scottish Premier League, Celtic regained the ball from 23% of their pressures, which is by a long distance the best in the league. We're the most effective pressing team in the league by so. I think the next highest is probably something like 17 or 16 or 17%. This was 30%. So at the highest level, against a team that play in a league where everybody presses, against a team who's trained to death in pressing, we regained the ball from 30% of our pressures, which is insane. And we restricted them to 15%. This is one of the best pressing teams in the world football, probably, historically. And we only coughed the ball up from 15% of the pressure. So, again, that speaks to the ability of players to stay calm, maintain possession, even if it meant going backwards, and just control the ball and defend with the ball, which is the real theme that we're seeing with Rodgers' team. So game management, ability to recover, ability to play under pressure, and to execute a smart sort of pressing regime. Those were the things that I really pleased about.
Fantastic. I think, with what you're talking about there as well, the impact that Rodgers has had, I think, is absolutely phenomenal. And I think it really came together last night when I felt the players looked comfortable in the system. They themselves felt confident. They knew they could rely on their teammates. There was an obvious system, and they really looked mature. You think back to that dreaded game back in Germany, and it's unbelievable the difference. The way that Rodgers learned from that over in Italy, and then I was interested to see how we would set up last night playing at home, and very pleased again, just keeping things quite tight centrally and so forth, using the pace. But what really struck me more than anything was the pressing, was the regains. None more so than the goal just before half time. The Leipzig players, I don't think could believe it. There was 3 and 4 Celtic players around every one
That
of
was
them.
ridiculous.
Wasn't it? It
That
was actually
ridiculous.
incredible. And then the way that Celtic very intelligently, Hatate's movement, then Taylor cutting it back. I hope you noted the very clever dummy by Maeda as it came over to, which probably threw the goalkeeper actually, didn't it? For Kuhn to finish. But it was one of those games, as I was leaving, and I thought, who's my man of the match? And it was really difficult. Kuhn was like as Mercury with wings to his feet. He was just absolutely, what a beautiful game he had. But there was so many of them. I think of AJ, I think of Trusty. I thought Callum McGregor was absolutely phenomenal. He was truly rolling back the years and dictating the game, in my view. James, I wondered what you thought about the crucial area, really, in the middle of the park. What did you think were the highlights, I suppose? And we can always look at things that maybe for the future we need to be a little bit careful of.
Well, I think one of the things I took away from the game is an affirmation on the concept of fine margins. So I don't think our approach to this game was terribly dissimilar going into the game as what was probably intended at Dortmund. Okay. Meaning that just parsing, because a lot of this is supposition, but parsing Rodgers' response after that game, it seemed like the players, he talked about how it wasn't as coordinated as he would have liked. And, I'll use losing their head, maybe, going into Dortmund Champions League game like that. Some of these guys young, first time, maybe in that kind of an environment. Not a shock. Like, that's a human thing that could happen. So this game was different, fine margin, where our structure and how intelligent our pressing was. So we were also advanced and high, but we weren't chasing the ball stupidly and creating space for them to get out easily. And that's what we did with Dortmund. Kind of the headless chicken pressing phenomena. And so if you look at our press in that context, that fine margin was vitally important. The flip side of that is they're just not as good as in some of those positions as what we faced with Dortmund, particularly in midfield, Gross. And it's levels, right? So they also started a 19-year-old center back who we smartly seem to be trying to force play to their attack, their defensive left. And for whatever reason, I saw comments that, their right back wasn't great on the ball, and that's where the second goal came from. So they had their issues in building out big time that Dortmund didn't have. And some of that, I think a lot of it was because of how good we were, how smart we were. But on a fine margin basis, I think that's the majority of it, is their personnel was not as equipped to handle us being this good and being this smart. So they were just, it was almost like we were suffocating them. For large stretches of the game, particularly as we got out of that second 15-minute increment of squeaky bum time, we were completely suffocating them. They could not get out. It was like we were pressing Ross County, who was trying to build out from the back. It was that level of domination that was going on. I again, this goes back to the tactical chess game that we talk about. And they basically played 4-4-2, as Alan said they probably would. Alan talked about the risks and the talk of them having maybe some individualistic tendencies based off of their model, their club model. And I talked about how they have these really young guys, and it looked to me like they quit. And some people commented in the Substack chat that were at the game, and they picked up on that, like guys flailing their arms around, and just their head was, they were gone, like mentally. After we scored that third goal, they basically just quit. And it looked like that, right? I mean, so we were pretty easily passing the ball around, just running the clock out. So we won the tactical chess battle. Our players followed the game plan. It looked like to an excellent level, and that capitalized on what some of their relative weaknesses are within the context of their manager losing the chess game. And and then you factor in some finishing, where we had some pretty good finishing and their finishing wasn't great, and our goalkeeper made some good saves, and there's gifted us a goal. and that's the formula. That's kind of the decomposition of the way I think about how the game kind of played out.
Yeah, the amount of efforts and goals Celtic had, I thought, was phenomenal, and a lot of very close things. When you're looking at that team, lost 5 goals in the Bundesliga so far. 2 of them, of course, against Dortmund and the Westfalenstadion just the weekend there. The amount of efforts that we had, I thought, were incredible. And that's where you got your bit of luck, really, as you mentioned, with the goalkeeper, because he's been absolutely outstanding this season. For him to drop a clanger like that was just that little bit of luck that we needed.
The scientific way of characterizing that, Martin, is he was due.
As you have said in many,
he reverted to his mean.
Yeah, he was due to just dump one out there and pull a Craig Gordon.
It's unlike them to be due against us, though.
Right.
Normally it's against some other opposition. But when you're looking at those efforts, even when the substitutes came on as well, I thought it was pretty seamless. I'll be honest, there was that part of me when Yang came on. I thought, if he gives it away and we lose a goal, and there's still lots of time. He came on, he played his part, and he had a good effort actually as well, which just flew past the post. I thought throughout the team, it was a splendid effort. Alan, and again, in terms of the middle of the park, I'd mentioned McGregor. We were looking at likes of Hatate and so forth. I mean, what was your view on our midfield? Especially the starting midfield, and also the way the match ended with Bernardo, etc.
Yeah, I think all the midfield. I mean, especially McGregor and Hatate. Hatate had a, arguably some might say his best game for Celtic in many respects. There was many little magic moments sprinkled through the performance. He was definitely on his game. He was accelerating away from space. The way that he can change direction quickly from a standing start and just dart between players is lovely to see. And there was a couple of really nice through balls as well.
Yeah.
McGregor. I think it was even on BBC Scotland, believe it or not, they were talking about just his decision making, really, just the fact that he always seemed to pick the right pass. He always seemed to go the right way. He always seemed to, know when to accelerate, when to decelerate, when to slow the game down, when to quicken the game up. Those things don't really come out in the data so much. That's more of a, that you talk about sort of controlling the tempo of a game. I mean, he absolutely did in that midfield. He was a sort of a mini masterclass in that respect. They look to really sort of clog up the middle of the pitch, actually, and actually, therefore, it was our fullbacks, I thought, that were very important in progressing the ball. They didn't have a huge amount of the ball, but they progressed it well, and they moved it forward to the wingers quickly, especially Kuhn on the right hand side, who's turning into. I mean, he's having an absolutely incredible season, Kuhn, and definitely will be digging into him a little bit. I mean, one of the features of Kuhn from a data perspective that is, and again, you start to see more of us talking about this IQ model that we've kind of alluded to. So one of the features of that, I talk about packing, right? So the real sort of the real kind of positive indicator in packing is not so much how many players are taking out of the ball, how many defenders are you taking out of the game. And the thing with Kuhn, so Matt O'Reilly didn't have the greatest volume of packing stats, but he always took more defenders out of the game than anybody else. That meant that he picked his moments. It was, again, I talk about this time and time again, it's quality over quantity. With Kuhn, again, similar. It's extraordinary, not just passing, but receiving and passing as the number of defenders he takes out of the game. And now he's a German. Packing's a German concept. He probably understands this intrinsically. So he's just got that gift. And then you start to look at the quality of the chances, the shots he takes, the chances that he creates. He's a very special season. He's turning out to have. Hopefully, the ice on his hamstring was just precautionary. But the midfield was excellent. Hatate, McGregor, especially. Engels was fine. I like Engels. He makes mistakes. He's a young player. He had a few moments of bad control. Him and Hatate are not brilliantly press resistant. They got caught in possession a couple of times each. But what I enjoyed was, you mentioned the subs, is that I think Bernardo's really struggled the last few games, and he came on and was just so positive. And
Yeah.
actually, playing forward balls, getting on the end of forward balls, brilliant. And Yang came on, and I'd pretty much written off Yang, to be honest with you, quite a while ago, actually. But again, he was taking the ball in tight areas. He was brave on the ball. It wasn't so much even his final third stuff. It was just his ability to take the ball, to progress it. He looked forward a lot, but he came back when he needed to. He just played a really smart game when he on. Those two especially, I thought, were excellent as substitutes, and the quality didn't drop when they came on. So lots of great individual performances. I mean, I think Kuhn really sort of took the man of the match award for me, just because he was literally the match winner. I mean, he literally won that game for Celtic. He got us back into the game. Hatate ran him close. Hatate had by miles the best sort of packing scores, the second best attacking threat score, the second best expected scoring contribution. He had his magic moments as well. So he was very unlucky that Kuhn just had a sort of magic night in terms of not quite being the man of the match. But there were so many strong performances and not many weak ones. I mean, Maida probably had a pretty quiet game really by his standards, but then he was by miles the most active presser,
Yes,
as well as
absolutely.
is normal. So off the ball, he was super impressive as well. Other little magic moment for me was the Schmeichel save on 70 minutes. That shot,
From
Valle,
Baumgarten. Yeah.
Baumgartner. Valle came on, and Valle was a bit skittish when he came on. He was a bit of a mixed bag, and he was just not quite up to the speed of the game, got caught on the back post. Baumgartner brought it down well, got a shot away early with his left foot. Schmeichel had very little chance to react, and also was the ball was coming through Valle almost. So to get down and get that past the post, and then 2 minutes later was when the third goal went in. That was a key moment in the game.
Absolutely.
Those little bits of variance, that save versus Galacci, coughing it up for Hatate. The other bit of variance that I think was very important to how the game panned out was actually the refereeing. Carter Vickers and Trusty were allowed to be pretty rough
Yep.
with their two strikers, and
Yep.
and I was concerned in the game because both Sesko and Openda are the type of forwards that could just do something magic out of nothing, right? And suddenly you're a goal behind, and they were given pretty rough treatment by both Celtic strikers, and the referee let them have it, and they both got incredibly frustrated. And I think Sesko was head had gone. I think quite early in the game. Actually, he just didn't fancy it. He didn't fancy being roughed up that way. Openda couldn't get in the game either. And they are the sort of magic men for them because all the other players behind them are good, solid players, and they're athletic, but they're kind of functional. But Baumgartner is a real good playmaker. He had a very mixed night, actually, apart from his goal, obviously, in that shot. He was kind of hot and cold. And those two, I thought, our two centre backs kind of gave them a hard time physically, and they didn't like it, and the ref let them. So that's a little bit of variance that went our way that on another night in another stadium may not have gone our way.
I think that is a hugely important point, Alan, because I made that mental note watching the game, because I mean that some of those were really on the line. You know what I mean? Not only forget about cards, but I mean he was just letting material physical play go, like guys grabbing even, and like grabbing a shoulder and twisting a guy, like I think Trusty did on one occasion. He just let it go, and vast majority of the time those things get called, particularly in Europe. I mean, they get assaults happen all the time in Scotland and are allowed to happen without calls. The other thing I wanted to note, so this goes back to the chess game, and I just wanted to. So we talked about this being a 4-4-2 for them, but it's also at times 4-2-2-2, right? Where you have the wide midfielders were up a little higher, and what that did is it creates that space centrally. And I looked up as we were talking here. So UEFA tracks physical, like distance covered, and I wrote something because Y Scout had a trial for a little bit in the Big Five leagues that I did some. I had fun with it and did some and wrote a column on it in the Substack. So if you look at the top speed for their two central midfielders, so again, in the 4-2-2-2, you only have basically two central midfielders, the way they were playing the wide two midfielders, and Hedera and Campbell. Yep. So Campbell's high end, this is kilometers per hour, so far in Champions League is 28.8. That's like slow for a Champions League midfielder. That's gross from Dortmund. Like that's the level that he was at. And Hedera, this actually surprised me. He was only 30.1 kilometers per hour. That's his max so far. So Engels has been 31.9, Hatate 30.6, and McGregor 29.7. So we outnumbered them centrally, and they didn't have the athleticism to compensate for having 3v2, basically, in that space, in that central space. So even though, we talk a lot about the Red Bull model, being narrow and central, it didn't really play out that way in this game. They defended that way when they got deep, but as the game, would get stretched a little bit, and as they tried to press us forward, I thought there was plenty, and this is what, again, this is the strengths of Hatate in particular, is to be able to get into those spaces and make those turns on the ball and pick out passes from deep. That's been my favorite use of him. It's part of why I advocated under Ange that he should try the inverted fullback role, like him in those central spaces deep and making those turns and being press resistant with the turn. Again, he can get caught on the ball, as Alan said. So I think that was also a big part of the chess match, is that we outnumbered them to a degree at times centrally, and they didn't have the horses to make up for it in a 3v2 situation.
Yeah, I think something as well that's maybe worth thinking about. We talked about how Celtic weathered the storm, which was exactly the phrase I used to the guy next to me after they scored. That was the only one, I think, the only error Schmeichel made really was the ball was going past and he touched it. And I remember at the time I thought, that's just typical of our luck. This'll, and of course we cleared the first one and then they scored the second. And
that was the classic power of three, Martin, because Trusty gave the ball away in central midfield, so that allowed them to break against essentially five defenders. Only McGregor was back; everyone else was out of the game at that point. Then Schmeichel elected to put it around the post, even though the ball was going wide. So that's two. The first corner was cleared, fine. Then I can't really blame Carter because he's at the front post. Mm-hmm. He gets something on it, but Engels completely loses his man. That's three.
That's right. Yeah,
three things, and you can see the goal, or and it's a great chance. So that was a classic example of the power of three on that one.
And I thought that's an excellent point, Alan, and thanks for that. And the next moment was one where that was when my heart went for the first time. Really, they got the next corner that came in, and it was the captain, the centre half, was a Hungarian, wasn't it? Get the head
that
to
was
the ball. I
close.
thought it was in. I thought it was in.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, we've got away with one there. And then I think it might have been you that alluded to this a little bit earlier, James. And I think the game really changed from this point as well. They broke on us, they outnumbered us, and I think AJ slipped or went down under a challenge, and it gets slipped to the number 7 Noosa, and I thought, oh no, you were just waiting for it to hit the net, and he just ballooned it over the bar, and I thought, right, well, we're still in this game here, these are big opportunities they've had, we're still in this if we can get a bit of luck. And then of course the moment of magic, Bakun and Alan, to get back to the sort of post-traumatic stress of being a Celtic fan. When he shot, I thought, that's hitting the post and coming out. There's no way. There's no way that's getting in. It reminded me a little bit of a different type of shot, but that moment when McGregor hit the bar hit the post against Real Madrid when we were well on top. And I was just watching the arc of the ball, and I thought, oh, that's hitting the post and coming out. And what a beautiful moment, what a beautiful goal. And again on Kuhn, one that I really enjoyed, there was a break, I think again, AJ and Kuhn I thought combined really well. In fact, one of the aspects of the game I thought we were terrific was little combinations of players all over the pitch. They really knew what they were doing and knew their partners and so forth. And he got the ball and he ran with it, Kuhn, and he hit it with the outside of his left foot, a la Cruyff, right into Maeda, who proceeded to put it over the bar. Not an easy chance, chance. But it was just that moment. You were, oh man, what a goal this could be.
You got to hit the target.
Kuhn had done that in preseason. That was one of the brilliant goals.
That's right. I
forget which of the preseason games, but it was.
You
went to those games, didn't you?
Yeah. But yeah, it's again, decomposing the performances. So AJ was brilliant when we got forward and making. I mean, the runs he was making, and again, right. It was just great. The movement.
He had a shot, didn't he, in the penalty area as well, just before halftime.
Yep. So that was all brilliant. But at the same time, when they were exerting a lot of pressure forward, he was a material part of the problem that we were having in getting out. And that is not a new thing. Like at this level, I think he's been struggling to a degree, being press resistant. And it's both on the ball, but also even when he's given a little bit of space, picking out the wrong pass and maybe underestimating angles and the speed with which the defenders are able to cut passing routes off at this level. I mean, there's a fair amount of times when he's trying to break lines and bypass, a layer of players, ours and defenders, to the next level, and the passes get cut off. And that was during that 15-minute period. He had a couple of those, whether he was either pressed off of it or, made one of those passes that got jumped, basically like a route getting jumped, as I like to say, like an NFL cornerback that reads the play and jumps the route. And so, overall, you wash it all out. And because they didn't really turn any of those into really great chances, his good outweighed the bad. But that's why we have this 5% allocation even in the most brilliant games.
always leave 5% for misery.
That's right.
So it was you. I mean, it was you that pointed out, James, and rightly, that Johnson he loves. He feels comfortable when there's contact. He loves contact. He loves to get physical with his opponent, and his tendency to give away bad free kicks, as in free kicks in bad areas. I think you pointed that out before, and that's really is something that I think is right. And he's got this other thing that he does, and he did it in this game in the 70th minute, I believe, when they were breaking. And it led to Baumgartner's shot that Schmeichel saved. Right, is they were breaking, and he went to ground, and he just slid in. Right, there was no control. He won the ball, he won the challenge. Right, but the ball flew out to somebody on the left who then crossed it to Baumgartner for the shot. So the point I'm trying to make is, and it was the same kind of principle I had, especially last season with Scales and his heading duels, is okay, he won the duel, but you have no idea where the ball's going. There's no control in it. And it's the same with Johnson. he does this thing where he flies into challenges on the edge of the box, and he might well win the ball, but you've got no idea where it's going to go. You're purely chancing to luck as to then what happens to the ball. And that's another trait of his, I think. And because he just can't resist that physical challenge, and he can't resist being positive. He's a positive guy. You can see it in the way he speaks. He wants to do something positive all the time. And in that instance, Schmeichel bailed us out, and then we go up there at their end and get the third. Those are the tiny margins. Those are the tiny margins at this level. This was a great performance, but different referee, different goalkeeping performances on either end. It all can be different. But listen, we've been on the other side of that so many times.
How many penalties have we were due.
How many red cards have we seen? All that. So we absolutely take it. We absolutely take it.
I mean, it's worth pointing. Sorry, I was just going to say, James, it's maybe worth pointing out as well that the kind of heart and the bottle to come back from being a goal down, and the crowd stayed with the team as well, even during that 15-minute spell when it didn't look so well. It wasn't filled with groans and moans. It was a bit quieter. But I was actually thinking afterwards, and I may be wrong, and I'm sure somebody would point it out to me, but I think the last time I can remember us coming back from a goal down in the Champions League, and you probably come back with something completely different immediately, but I remember it's going back to the Strachan era. It was at Shakhtar. I think we ended up, Donati scored right at the end for the winner. Remember, we were a goal down then. I can't think of other matches that we came from a goal down, so that may well be the last time. In fact, I think that was the last period that we won the 3 games back to back. It would have been AC Milan, Benfica, then Shakhtar. So, I don't think it can be underestimated the way that the team showed that amount of heart. And it was one of the crazier games and most enjoyable games I've seen, where the first minute or two, it seemed like it was going to be end to end. I was like, I don't think I can handle this, It's like a save at one end, a save at the other. Then it kind of Celtic got hold of it. Then, as you say, they come in. And after they scored and had those opportunities, what did give me heart was, in the past, we've kind of lost clusters of goals in Europe at times. We've lost our heads and lost the game almost within a couple of minutes. And having survived that, I felt quite confident. But that period coming up to half-time was insane. The amount of opportunities. I think Kyogo had one as well, where he burst through, and it was a fantastic tackle by the Leipzig captain again, come over. And interestingly enough, Maeda was in the inside as well there. But as I said earlier, the amount of chances was absolutely superb.
Yeah, so that was the 45th minute. And so Noosa's miss, and again, this goes back to context. So he's wide open.
Yep.
He also has a teammate that he could play in that would probably get a tap in.
Mm-hmm.
He's 19. This is what makes guys like Yamal mutants. Like teenagers playing at these clubs that are just ruthless with their finishing, and just like those are like purple unicorns. They don't come around that often. So, a guy in that situation who's 19, not making the best decision, and or, getting the, as I call it, the yips, right? So he got the yips a little bit. I don't think that ball bobbled on him. I think he just frickin' ballooned it. Which was like the worst outcome for him in that situation. I go back to uncontrollable variance, right? So there's nothing that we could have done to make that happen. It just happened. And God loved that it happened. But to your point, Martin, like him making a good decision there, or putting a good finish on the ball that Schmeichel couldn't have saved, for example, or Schmeichel making an error, which, was in the spectrum of possibilities, not likely, but possible. And we're 2-0 down. And what happens from there? Like that follows. This is why I was saying it's like a fork in the universe, right? Yep. And it was nothing that we could do at that fork that would have driven probably what would have happened next. So, all of these things are like sliding doors moments in these games, which makes them so terrific. I mean, that's I can only imagine being in the stadium last night and how once that Kuhn goal went in, I mean, it was just it was game on at that point.
I have to say, James,
but there was that, just moments earlier that I mean, Kuhn's goal was the 35th minute, and Noosa's miss was the 31st. So it was like right there.
No, sorry, just you reminded me there, James, about being at the match. I was laughing at the end when Hatate collapsed. He was absolutely flat out with the effort he'd put in. And it reminded me, that's kind of what I'm like when I get down the stairs from the top of the North Stand, I've given everything, I had given everything emotionally and physically to get up and down there, so it reminded me a little bit of that.
I thought you were going to say it was one of your anniversary nights or wedding anniversary nights. When you give all you got to give and
yeah, obviously, I try. I won't get into stamina and all these sort of things, and I'm an aging player and all the rest of it. One thing I would like to point out as well. Sorry, Alan, if you don't mind, just before I forget, because I'm getting on. But I thought with Engels, he'd quite a tough night. I thought with Kempler, especially the number 44 from Leipzig. However, echoing what you said, young guy, he's only going to get better from the experience. I thought he played pretty well. He did get sacked a few times, but the one that I was really impressed by, and there were a few very, some really good moments from him for the goal with Kuhn. What a pass that was outside of the foot, just turning. But more than that, after he passed it, he ran into position, a forward position, which stopped, I think it was Kempler again, actually, from coming out to meet Kuhn. So it gave Kuhn just that little bit of space to execute. And I thought that's fantastic for a young player, to have that desire and intelligence. I thought fair play to him. Sorry, Alan.
No, I mean, Engels, this is, so what I'm noticing with Engels is, even if there are a lot of untidy elements to his game, which there are, two things strike me about him. One is he never seems to lose confidence. He's seems to be a really kind of nicely balanced young man. And second of all, he seems to find a way to influence the game regardless. So yesterday, he actually created 5 chances, including the assist for Kuhn's goal, which is a nice little round the corner pass. He created 5 chances. That's 3 more than any other player, right? So he found, even if he's not having the best day, he stays calm and he finds a way to influence the game. So that's why I'm not worried about him. I think there are a lot of rough edges. There are a lot of rough edges. Same with Bernardo, but I think they've both got a good attitude. They both seem to have a good aptitude for learning. They both seem to not their heads don't go down, which is why I think be patient with them. They'll have bad moments, but I think they'll get there. So listen, you asked Factual Pursuit. You asked me a question about come from behind wins.
Oh no, I'm wrong.
My detailed match records go back to 2014-15, so I can't speak before 2014. So it's nearly 10 years then. So we've had, before last night, we had 4 games where we came from behind in European matches.
Okay? Champions League. I said
2 of them in Champions League qualifying. I will choose the criteria.
Qualifying, 2 of them did you say? Or the two of them, Champions League and the qualifier, very, very different things.
2 of them in Champions League qualifying, and 2 of them in Europa League group stages. So I'll not make you guess them, because we'll just prolong the agony. But the first one was July 2018, home to Rosenborg, 1-0 down, win 3-1. July 2019. Away in Sarajevo, 1 goal down, come back to win 3-1. And then the most noticeable would be the 2 Europa League games in 2019 against Lazio, home and away. In both matches, we were a goal down and came back to win 2-1. So those are the only 4 games I've got us as being behind and coming back to win in Europe, in any competition in Europe, over the last 10 years. Before that, I'd have to go and check other records.
Bet you it's Shakhtar, James. Champions League proper, mate.
Well, that was considerably longer than that. So yeah, So someone can dig about in the Celtic wiki. That's fine.
Oh yeah, we'll have a proper look there. You mentioned Baye as well earlier, Alan. The one that stood out for me with him again, he came on. I thought Taylor had a great game because I thought he looked a little bit rusty in his previous match, and was delighted how well I thought he handled the occasion and played really well. But even when Baye came on, he slotted in, and I remember. The one that stood out for me was he did a great covering run, and he very coolly headed it straight back to
Yeah,
Schmeichel.
that was brilliant.
And I thought, for a
That
young
was
guy,
brilliant. Yeah,
really fabulous.
yeah.
So
I mean, that
overall,
screamed. That screamed. I was brought up at Barcelona, didn't it?
yes.
That was cool.
Yeah, just really, really comfortable. But what stood out for me, as I said earlier, the performance, but even the pool of players we've got now, felt quite comfortable, and especially when Carter Vickers went off, it was a tried and tested, of course. Partnership with Scales and Trusty. So, compared to where we were at the start of the season, we've got guys that can come in and do a proper job for us. One thing that's worthy of note, perhaps, is that I mentioned it before, and we'll need to look at the pattern of this. This is maybe one for you, Alan. I don't know if you can be bothered, but it seems that the supercomputer has got us away from home again after a tough, challenging Champions League night. So one of the I would imagine one of the harder matches away to Kilmarnock at the weekend. A, they don't like us. B, it's a horrible pitch. And last season, it was pretty much neck and neck. They put us out of the League Cup. We got a draw. We ended up coming back winning the league there, of course, but they beat us as well in the league at their pitch. So it was much of a muchness. Overall, we tend to get good results. I think prior to last season, the last time they beat us was, I think, 2018, was at Rugby Park. How do you feel, I suppose, James, about the game? Do you feel pretty confident going into the match, or do you think our exertions and the type of pitch, could play a big part?
Yeah, annoyingly confident. This is, I said to Alan before we started taping, going to Kilmarnock and then going to Hearts. Those are the two that, coming out of a European game where you put forth a lot of effort, and those are the two you're like, oh man, I just could these not have fallen at a different time? Not because you're not, not because you lack confidence, but just on margin, it's kind of the least ideal situation. So all the factors that you mentioned, all the ones we know, what I will say is they're one of the teams where their underlying performance metrics are, they're really underperforming. So, they've got some bad goalkeeping. Their finishing hasn't been great. So, they've been having a rough season so far to a degree. But if you actually just look at kind of, and we've talked about this relative to Aberdeen and the importance of game state and that kind of stuff. So they'll have the flip of that because they've been trailing quite a bit. But the kind of their non-penalty XG differentials right there with Aberdeen this season. So I'm not suggesting they're as good as Aberdeen because of that context of game state, but they're also not like 10th or 11th or 12th level quality in the team. And if you take them at home, they're just I'll do non-penalty XG just at home. Let's do that. And they are 4th in the league. Right, they're actually better than Aberdeen by a pretty decent clip in that regard. So they're one of these teams where at home they're totally different. They're built to kind of optimize that, and they do present very specific challenges. Now the upside is it's a Sunday game after a Tuesday Champions League game, so it'd be if this was Wednesday, Saturday, it'd probably be a little more anxious just because of the turnaround and recovery. That would probably raise more questions as far as player rotation. And it's gonna be like the antithesis of what we just enjoyed yesterday. A lot of bouncing balls and aerial assaults. So it's one of those annoying ones. We should be confident. We should win it, But when you go through each season, this is one of those games where the probabilities of dropping points are higher than normal and materially so. So, would it shock me if we end up in a 0-0 draw, at Kilmarnock on a game following a Champions League match? Absolutely not. That's not the base case, but it's certainly something to be aware of, but also, and not like it's not going to be the end of the world if it happens, right? I mean, it's within a 38 game season. These are the ones that are more likely to drop points. So it wouldn't be, set your hair on fire and run around in panic stations.
Yeah, I think just before I come to you, Alan, they're quite handy for a goal. I think it's like 8 league games in a row they've actually scored. They seem to come back to a bit of form. Then they lost the 2-goal leads last weekend up at Dundee, lost 3-2 to a late goal. They've got a couple of injuries which could prove quite costly for them. Their centre back Findlay get taken off. He's been a bit of a mainstay for them, and I think he's going to be out for a period of months now. So they'll certainly miss him. And a guy that has caused us a few problems in the past, Armstrong, kind of winger. He's a bit doubtful through a hamstring whether they might risk him because there's an international break coming up. They might give him a go at some point there. What do you see in terms of the Celtic team, Alan? What sort of team would you put out? Would you rest any players, or would you try and keep it as strong as our first choice as possible?
No, I wouldn't. We've got the best part of 5 days to prepare for this game, so that's well outside of the minimum requirements of rest. Even after a tough game, there was a bit of a press fest against a Bundesliga team. Even all that into account, yes, we saw Carter Vickers had to be taken off again around 75 minutes, and he's obviously being managed through what looks like some sort of condition maybe that he's having to manage.
Not the best pitch for a toe, Alan.
No, well, no. Kuhn's, obviously had some ice on his hamstring. But all that being said, 5 days to recover. It's the last game before another international break. You've just laid down a marker against the second best team in the country, beating them 6-0. You're neck and neck with them in the league. You want to leave for that international break on a high, right? So you put out this. There's going to be no resting players. This will be the strongest team that Rodgers can put out. Probably the team that started the other night. Toss up between Valle and Taylor, probably Taylor, just because of he's probably a bit more solid. And
everyone's saying Valle is getting recalled to Barcelona. Alan, what the hell's going on?
Well, that's a bizarre story. That is a bizarre story. I mean, the reason that he's at Celtic is because they're outside of FSR financial sustainability regulations. They're having to have players off their wage bill, etc. So I'm not understanding that they're suddenly in a better position on that one. So that does seem a bizarre one, but hopefully
we'll just move Scales to left back anyway. That's fine.
So to answer your question, no, I think we'll go as strong as we can, and rightly so. Most of the players then, a lot of them will have 2 weeks off, or 2 weeks sitting on the bench in Japan or whatever it might be. So I don't think that's going to be a huge issue. I think Kilmarnock are a bit of a funny side this season. I think I don't know. I've not seen a lot of them. Obviously, I watched the game where they beat the Rangers. I mean, that was just a dreadful game of football, and they kind of
I quite enjoyed it.
And Nick's oh yeah, it was great. It was great, shits and giggles and all that. But it was a dreadful game of football. And actually, that's the wins that they've had is that one at home to them, and then away at Hearts, and then a 3-2 at Dundee. So it's bizarre the games they've won. They seem to really struggle at the beginning of the season trying to balance European football and with the squad that they've got. I think they've had troubles, as James says, at goalkeeper. I mean, McCrory's not a great goalkeeper, and he's back in as number one. Yeah, I think you alluded to injury to Findlay. I think they've generally had a very unsettled back four. So at various points, either through red cards or injury.
They've had a lot of red cards.
A lot.
Yeah, they've had four. They've had four. That's had a big impact on because all 4 red cards they've had in the league have been around before the 60th minute, so they've been material to those games. They've had a lot of changes in personnel and defence. None of their defenders has played in every league game, so they've had a very unsettled defence. Their usual midfield from last season of Polworth and Donnelly have virtually not played together at all. Watson, who was their sort of bright young star in central midfield, he's been only just got back into the team and perhaps has gone off the boil a little bit. Armstrong has gone way off the boil. His numbers are pretty horrible this season. The only one that's really holding up his end is Kennedy, the other winger on the left.
Yeah, he's a Northern Irish international, isn't he?
Yeah, he's having a decent season, but Vassell, Armstrong, not really hitting the heights they had last season. Watkins missed the last game as well, but obviously he's 33. He scored 3 goals. He's been quite decent, but it looks to me like a team that hasn't been refreshed since last season, where they did very well. They've got largely the same 11 players again. The new signings, I like Bruce Anderson that they got from Livingston, because even though teams don't seem to trust him to start, his numbers are always amazing in terms of even if he's coming off the bench, in terms of his expected goals, etc. For every team that he's played. But and he started the last game. They actually went 3-5-2 at Dundee. They've been 4-4-2 all season. Whether that, with the injuries that they've got, that's something that we might see. We might see again. I don't know, but they look to me from a distance like a team that's desperately in need of a refresh. Is really not picked up after a disappointing European exit and a disappointing start to the league season. Whether they're feeling sorry for themselves, they just can't get going. So I wouldn't. It's going to be an awkward game. It's going to be a horrible game. I'm sure they'll be up for it. They've had a week to prepare, but and we haven't won in 5 of the last 11 visits to Rugby Park. But then the other games, we've had a 3-1, a 4-0, a 5-0, a 4-1, and a 5-0. So I think the mood that Celtic are in, the fact that we're not going to rest players unless there are genuine injury concerns, we're going to go strong. We're going to try and go out on a high. I'm expecting a strong performance from Celtic on Sunday for sure.
One of the selection calls I'll find interesting is I could see a reasonable case to be made for Ida in this game. Above and beyond the rotation aspect is probably the most likely threat that they're going to have is through set pieces, and at home they're actually matching us in XG per game relative to if you just take home. So Celtic at Celtic Park, Kilmarnock at home, we basically have the same XG created per game, and they just haven't been scoring off of them. So here we go again. What's the rationale, Martin? Are they due or not? Are they due? Are they due for a set piece goal? For God's sakes, I hope not. But that wouldn't shock, So I think Ida on the margin. These kind of games. Obviously, he did well there to clinch the league. Had a huge game. So I think that would be a reasonable rotation that I would be okay with. Particularly if he hasn't been getting selected, so probably won't be, but I guess it's theoretical that Kyogo might be flying off to all corners of the earth to sit on the bench, as Alan says,
or visiting Iona or other Scottish sites of interest as well, while the rest of his friends travel the world.
Iona. I've been to Iona, Martin. Did you know that? And I drove the northern route from Tobermory, and I had 2 toddlers in the car and almost went into the drink at least 4 times because of sheep on the road. Because there's no...
You swear for the sheep?
Oh, there's no banister.
That's not like you.
In the single lane road on the northern route. If you make a wrong turn, you're off into the ocean, off a cliff. With no.
Do the kids still talk about this?
Well, they were too young. I don't remember. I still lament it because I almost had a heart attack because of the stress of making this stupid drive. We thought it would be scenic, and here I almost died 5 times. I didn't even get to enjoy the scenery. I'm like, white knuckling the whole ride. Blind turds on a single lane road with no guardrail and sheep and cars coming the direction. And it's like, what the F am I doing here? I should have just taken the Southern Horseshoe route. I'd be there by now and I wouldn't be dying.
Life's all about anecdotes. Right. Here all these years later, you're relating this story.
That's right. Part of the spice of life. But I liked Iona and Tobermory. They were great. It's just getting in between the two was a horror show.
And so for all our listeners, international and otherwise, you've heard it from James, that could be a new feature on the stack, places to visit.
James's travelogue involving
driving around the Highlands and the Western Hebrides.
We might put an extra show on weekly, actually.
Yeah. Well, is it my turn for Poetry Corner?
I was actually worried. It is indeed, but I didn't want to embarrass you and put you in that position, James. I'm delighted if you do have one. I'm actually
prepared for a change. Rarely. So I took a different tack because of what just happened yesterday politically. I picked. It's actually an Arabic poem in Sufi. And it's a long poem. I'm just going to read the one part because I thought it was, pretty good, because there's a lot, the world's just horrible right now. So it's written by a poet named Ibn Arabi. And my Arabic is almost as bad as my English. And in English, I'm not going to try to pronounce the poem in Arabic, the title, but it's I Believe in Love's Religion. And it goes, "Oh, marvel, a garden amidst the flames. My heart has become capable of every form. It is a pasture for gazelles and a convent for monks, a temple for idols and the pilgrims of Kaaba, and the tables of the Torah and the book of the Quran. I follow the religion of love. Whatever way love's camels take, that is my religion and my faith." So we need more love in the world right now, regardless of who gets elected to office.
And camels, absolutely.
And camels. So let's all just love one another more.
And our camels.
Yes. And in the immortal words of Ringo Starr, peace and love, peace and love.
I thought you were going to give us a bit of Thomas the Tank Engine there when you introduced Ringo Starr as a quotation. That'll be next week. Well, I can absolutely say I hope that we continue having our party from the Champions League, take it all the way to Rugby Park against Kilmarnock. Always great to go into these international breaks on a high, no bad vibes at all. Make sure that there's no encouragement, no sniff for those who would like to take over and so forth. Our main rivals, Aberdeen or even the Rangers. Make sure that we go in a real high. So, guys, I'd like to thank you again ever so much. That was really illuminating. Really enjoyed your thoughts there. Thanks everyone for joining us again. If again, a wee reminder, do please like and subscribe in whatever platform you're listening or watching on. And do join us again next week when we'll be discussing the Kilmarnock match as well. So all the best, and hope you all have a great weekend. Bye.